case, and then you won't be on the record down the road.
There you go.
So is it recording?
Yeah.
Okay, so my name's Doug Beckett. I'm the founder of the Prince George Electric Vehicle Association and co-founder of the Energy Transition Group. I've been appointed to the BC Government Zero Emissions Vehicle Council as well. I've been driving electric vehicles in Prince George since 2009. And I've been doing presentations and collecting data. I'm a bit of a data geek for a long time. So about 5 years ago, we'll click on there. So about 5 years ago, I gave a presentation to a local breakfast club, as well as to many other people and groups about why everybody will be driving electric vehicles. So I'm was recently asked to give a presentation to that breakfast club again, and I thought, well, it's time to refresh my presentation. So this time I'm doing the presentation is the energy transition doable? And I'm going to reflect back on where we were at 5 years ago once in a while through the presentation. So to begin with, I'll do a little bit of conflict of interest, so you know where my bias is or may be. Reflect on BC's current energy status, where I think BC's future electrical production could be going. A little bit on EVs 5 years ago and where we're at now, and then provide you a number of resources and contact information if you want to follow up. I can make this slide deck available to any of you in the notes. I have web links that go to a lot of the source information that's in this. So I don't receive any consulting fees. I don't have any patents. So I'm not going to be making money off of influencing you to do one thing or another. I'm not receiving grants or research support. My financial investments aren't set up that I'm going to benefit from shifting your behavior. I have received some free food over the decades being involved with promoting electric vehicles. I received a $200 gift card from a local solar installing company because somebody else installed solar. So the people who installed solar and I went out for dinner on the gift card. Where the conflict of interest really happens for me is if you listen to me and you change your behavior and you drive electric vehicles and you shift off of fossil fuels, I'm going to be breathing cleaner air, which is going to improve my health. So thank you in advance. And it also means that I pay less taxes towards the health system, which is kind of nice. So what is energy transition? It's a transition to no longer using oil and gas or other polluting products. So looking at Canada, this middle bar is the hydro use in Canada. And then nuclear is another non-carbon bar, but I personally don't consider that one clean, but it is clean from the carbon perspective. So those are the two clean areas. And then the rest is fossil fuel energy based. So there's a lot of fossil fuel energy that's involved in our current system. British Columbia is a similar perspective, where about 19% of our primary energy is provided through electricity. Most of that is hydro and tends to be reasonably clean and very clean compared to the alternatives that we're using, which is fossil fuels and biomass. I consider biomass a fossil fuel. It's often very carbon intense release. So we're 81% fossil fuels, 19% electric. So you take we'll round that up to 20%. So 20% is what we're at, 40, 60, 80, 100. Does that mean we need to produce 4 times the electricity we're producing today to shift off of the fossil fuels. Well, there's things called energy charts. And on this energy chart, if you look at the left, that's your primary energy going into the systems. And this is for British Columbia and the territories. And if you look on the right, you can see the useful energy. So 467 petajoules, units of energy that go into the process, gets used to do work. There's another 500 units that's end-use losses and another 300 units that is just wasted through the process. So we're looking at 2/3 of our primary energy is wasted and doesn't actually do work. Only 1/3 of the primary energy is doing work. So looking at this greenhouse gas emission chart, the fossil fuels emit greenhouse gases, carbon emissions. So if we're looking at the emissions, we're looking at where the fossil fuel energy portion is being used. So 41% comes from the transportation sector, 39% from industry, and 20% from buildings and communities. Now, since I'm into electric vehicles and the implications there, the presentation is focused on this 41%, but we'll get a sense of what's going on with the others as well. So if we're looking at the transportation portion only, it's a little different in that again for British Columbia, 79 units of energy actually is used, while 237 units is wasted. So 3/4 of the primary energy going into our transportation is wasted. And if we look at the tools of transportation, we can understand why that happens. So if we look at the gas and diesel vehicles, the internal combustion engine, and that's why you hear people saying we're coming to the end of the ice age, because these vehicles are on their way out. We're looking at about 16 to 25% of the primary energy that goes into the process actually turns the wheels, actually does work. With electric vehicles, about 87 to 91% of the primary energy going in actually does work. So you're only losing that's 13% with the electric vehicles. Now, how much electrical production we end up producing, needing to produce, depends on choices we make. And one of the options that we're looking at is maybe going to using hydrogen. And in the energy transportation world, you can burn the hydrogen similar to diesel, or you can use it as a fuel cell technology. And the fuel cell technology is the clean technology. So that's the one I'm looking at here. And it's around 32% efficient. Again, similar to the gas and diesel vehicles. It's not an efficient fuel, and the use of it is not efficient. Now, BC Hydro has done a lot of work to project out what our electrical use, the demand has been over time. And then what might it be? So the bottom line of dots is if we basically don't do anything with the energy transition, we just continue doing what we're doing. And then the others are different scenarios of if the energy transition happens faster and faster. So if the energy transition happens the fastest that BC Hydro has projected it might happen, we'll need to produce a little more than 90,000 gigawatt hours per year in 2043. Now, BC Hydro has recently put out a call asking for, the intent is to get another 15% increase in electrical production by 2030. So you can see that they're assuming that we're not going to be on the fastest transition to the energy transition, but we are doing something. So at that, then we're getting closer to 70,000 gigawatt hours. So we're currently, again from BC Hydro, currently using about 58,500 gigawatt hours a year. That's actual 2022. A little over 19,000 gigawatt hours for residential, 19,000 for commercial and light industry, 13,000 for large industry. And yes, there are system losses, so about 7,000 gigawatt hours through losses. So with that 15% increase, we will be trying to get 67,000 gigawatt hours. That's an increase of 8,500 gigawatt hours. In Site C, which is slowly coming online now and should be within about 2 years, providing us about 5,100 gigawatt hours a year. So a good portion of that 15% increase is already in the process of happening. Now, just to put Site C into context, 2 years ago, I was at the Moccasin Walk, Lake Tenay community close by here, and a proponent who works for the pipeline that goes near Prince George to the coast was saying that they'd like to put compressors along their pipeline that has not yet started yet. And if they put in compressors, which would move a lot more natural gas through that pipeline, that he was saying it would use all of the electricity that Site C is about to produce. We recently had a public review session for a proposed hydrogen facility in Prince George. And again, based on my calculations, it would have required close to all of the electricity from Site C. BC Hydro suggests that in their promotional material with Site C, that it's enough electricity to drive 1.7 million electric vehicles each year on the road. And my numbers confirm that, and I'll show that in a little bit. So recognizing fuel cell vehicles are not as efficient as electric vehicles, I can drive 3-4 times further on the same input electricity in my battery electric vehicle as can be driven for a hydrogen vehicle. That would fuel only 425,000 fuel cell vehicles if we go the fuel cell technology. And BC Hydro says that on the whole, that this would be enough electricity to run 450,000 homes in British Columbia each year. So going to the vehicles, electric vehicle driving 18,000 kilometers a year will use about 3,000 kilowatt hours a year. And that's based on my experience, and I've noticed many others are reporting the same type of fuel use and efficiency. So hydrogen would require about 12,000 kilowatt hours to do the same. There's 3.7 million vehicles on the road today, licensed vehicles. And that's from ICBC data. So that would be about 11,100 gigawatt hours to convert all of those vehicles to drive as battery electric vehicles. If we do hydrogen, we need over 44,000 gigawatt hours. So let's go back to BC Hydro's current status. We're at 58,500. If all the vehicles were electric, we need that much more electrical production. If your battery electric technology would be using a little less, if some of those are direct electric. Think of the old electric trolley cars with the overhead wires that can be more efficient. But and that's about 2.2 Site Cs. And we're looking at that increase being needed over about 30 years time period. We're not going to get all of our vehicles being battery electric quickly. So that's easy to do, probably just by adding solar on existing structures. So on top of that, though, we have the other 59% in that pie chart of other technologies that use fossil fuels that we're going to transition off of fossil fuels to electric. If those technologies are similar in efficiencies as our electric vehicles or battery electric vehicles, probably need about double the production we currently have to not have to use a single drop of fossil fuel in the future. Again, we're looking at 30 plus years for that transition, but so you don't need to make the production right away. But it leaves questions as to how we're going to do it. Now, if hydrogen, we're looking at the hydrogen vehicles alone, we're close to doubling just to do the vehicles. And then you got the other 59% on top of that. So hydrogen technology scares me. The creating electricity is not clean. There are greenhouse gas emissions, there are environmental impacts. So hydrogen will mean at least 4 times the greenhouse gas emissions, at least 4 times the environmental footprint damages than not doing hydrogen and instead sticking with direct electric and battery electric. So from an environmental perspective, from an economic perspective, I'm hoping we avoid hydrogen. And that's about 9 Site Cs for the hydrogen instead of 2+ Site Cs for the battery electric. Now, something that I've noticed is that I can drive about 700 kilometers in a month on the electricity that a block heater uses in a month. And then people are using electricity to pump the gas from the gas stations into the gas cars. So there will be a reduction in electrical use as we go from gas vehicles to electric vehicles in this equation. I just don't know how big that downward pressure is. So we actually don't have to produce as much as I'm first showing you. So how much more electrical production will we require to transition off of fossil fuels? It depends on what we transition to. As I've said, we do battery electric and direct electric. My educated guess is we need to double our production. If we start using hydrogen, we might need as much as 5 times more, maybe even 9 times more electrical production than we currently produce. And then on top of that, we're seeing new pipelines be established, possibly new hydrogen production facilities and new large industry, which will require increases in production on top of what we've already been looking at. So part of the idea of energy transition, is it possible? Is it happening? It's always good to look at investments. So in this case, we're looking at investments into various energy. So we look on the far left here, that's 2015, and the light blue line is global investments into fossil fuels. And we see it's around 1,300 billion US dollars. And the right bar is investments into clean energy. Now, the clean energy portion that's really of importance is the dark blue at the bottom, renewable power, and the grids and storage. So we're looking at about 700 US billion dollars in 2015. So 5 years ago, when I did my last talking circuit, the investments into fossil fuels had declined to about 1,100 US billion dollars. Investments in the renewable power and grids was still about 700 billion dollars. Look at 2024, investments in fossil fuels has declined to about 1,100 US billion dollars. And those two categories of the clean energy is over 1,200 US billion dollars. So the investments right now happening in the grids and the storage is greater than fossil fuels. And I think seeing that investment trend is a good indication of where we're going and how quickly. So the transition is happening. 2019, 5 years ago, Being an electric vehicle driver, an earlier adopter, I keep tabs on who has electric vehicles. So an educated guess in 2019, there's 60 electric vehicles, battery electric vehicles in and around Prince George. And on top of that, another 5 plug-in hybrids. And today I estimate that there's about 700 battery electric vehicles in and around Prince George, and an additional 60 plug-in hybrid electric vehicles on top of that. So 5 years ago, if you wanted an electric vehicle, there were 14 commercial vehicles for you to choose from, 27 plug-in hybrids, 3 fuel cell vehicles. Today, there are 60 electric vehicle makes and models that you can choose from. There's also 36 plug-in hybrids and 2 fuel cells. So strongly urge, don't go plug-in hybrid or fuel cell. Hybrids are very complicated vehicles. Your maintenance costs are greater than gas. There's more parts. Get into that in a bit. So BC government back in 2019 passed some legislation supporting regulation in 2020, which established targets for zero emissions vehicles. So that's battery electric vehicles, plug-in hybrid vehicles, and fuel cell vehicles. And their target was 10% of new vehicle sales by 2025, 30% by 2030, 100% by 2040. Well, the market was actually doing so good that 2023, the BC government revisited those targets and they increased them to 26% by 2026, 90% by 2030, and 100% by 2035. So 26%, people are saying, can we do that? Wow, the zero emissions vehicle sales have been increasing. So last year, we exceeded 22% of the new vehicle sales were zero emission vehicles, most of which are battery electric vehicles. So that's a 4% in sales numbers increase from 2022. So if we gain to a 4% increase, we will exceed the 2026 target this year. So the targets are not that aggressive. We're actually meeting them. Now, BC is often leading even California. It's a leader in North America with adoption of electric vehicles and the implementation of charging stations. So if we look, the United States in 2023, about 10% of their new vehicle sales were battery or were zero emission vehicles, 13% across Canada, and world is actually at 18%. So North America is lagging the world with the electric vehicle or electric transition. So again, let's look at the hydrogen. So we're looking at 4 million sales in the last 3 months of 2023, more than 3.5 million battery electric vehicles. And that includes plug-in hybrids, but plug-in hybrids are a small portion of that, mostly battery electric. So 3.5 million vehicles in 3 months. Hydrogen is doing sales. They are getting pilots and vehicles on the road, but when you're putting the hydrogen, real life experience compared to battery electric on the same scale, it's not showing up. The market is not picking up on hydrogen. So back in 2022, Bloomberg put out this, where the black line is showing your diesel and gas vehicles, your ICE, your internal combustion engine vehicles, and the number of vehicles sold in each year. So 2017 was the peak. The blue line on top is your zero emissions vehicles or your electric vehicles. And the 2023, 24, 25 were projections for Bloomberg. This came out in 2022. So you can see the amount of ICE vehicles is declining while the sales of electric vehicles is increasing. Now, with their projections, even though they weren't projecting very far, Bloomberg underestimated the actual electric vehicles that got sold in 2023 and overestimated the gas and diesel vehicles. So I suspect that we'll see in 2024, 2025, that there'll be that Bloomberg's projections have overstated ICE sales even more each year and underestimated the battery electric sales even more. So the transition is happening. We've been hearing news about the slowing down of battery electric sales. That's a slowing down. And there's no talk of a 32% decrease in gas vehicle sales. What's going on with the media? So a little bit of my real life data. I've driven almost 175,000 kilometers in electric vehicles. Started off in 2009 in a pickup truck that the local high school mechanics class converted for us. And in that time period, I've probably saved well over $18,000 in fuel alone. And that's going at $1.08 a liter back in that time period to $1.50 a liter in our recent time period, paying 9 cents a kilowatt hour back in that time period to 11 cents a kilowatt hour now. So if we look at the most recent vehicle I'm driving, 71,000 kilometers, I paid a little over $1,000 in fuel in that time period. So that's about $17 per 1,000 kilometers. That's filling up at my home because I have a commute vehicle. If I was driving a 30 miles to the gallon vehicle, so that's 9.4 liters per 100 kilometers fuel efficiency, I would have at $1.50 a liter, I would have used over 6,000 liters of gas, and I would have paid over $10,000. So even with my most recent one, I've saved almost $9,000. Yeah, so that's $140 per 1,000 cubic or kilometers of driving with the gas vehicle. And a little over a year ago, we installed 12 solar panels on our new shop and produced over 5,000 kilowatt hours in that year. And that 5,000 kilowatt hours, I can drive 30,000 kilometers a year for the next 30 to 50 years each year in my electric vehicle. So how many people can produce their vehicle fuel for their gas or diesel vehicle in their backyard? We can do it with electric vehicles. And right now, you can get a $5,000 rebate from BC Hydro if you decide to install an electric vehicle fuel station production facility in your house. So that was about $15,000 a year ago to install. And the installer has told me that today, because of cost reductions, it'd be about $12,000 to install that. And then if you get the rebate, that's $5,000 reduction to that 12,000. So a little reflection, the hydrogen sector with respect to transportation is struggling to get off the ground while electric options keep appearing at lower cost and better performance. And keep in mind, when you look out and you see hydro lines, those are pipelines for electrons. Most of North America has the electron pipeline distribution already in place, where hydrogen distribution is extremely limited and very, very, very expensive to put in. So for hybrids, plug-in hybrids, I've suggested don't go towards them. Some people look at hybrids, plug-in hybrids, as being the best of both worlds. Others consider them the worst of both worlds. I'm on the worst of both worlds side of this equation, in my view of them. Yes, you do get better fuel efficiency compared to a gas or diesel vehicle, but you don't get the fuel efficiency and cost reductions that you get with battery electric. The maintenance costs are greater with hybrids than with gas vehicles, which means they're much greater than with battery electric vehicles. A gas vehicle has about 2,000 moving parts. An electric vehicle has about 200 moving parts, way less. So there's way less to go wrong, way less to maintain. Your hybrids have the gas parts plus the electric parts plus some complicated parts to communicate amongst them. So it's going to be more expensive when something goes wrong, and the maintenance is going to be more expensive. Most plug-in hybrids don't come with level 3 charging. They only come with level 2. When you're distance driving, the infrastructure that's going in is your level 3, your fast charging infrastructure. So if you're distance driving with a plug-in hybrid, you're going to have a hard time finding a charging station. And if you do, you're going to spend 4 to 20 times longer to get the same range because it is the slower charge speed. So if you're out to get a new vehicle right now, purchase an electric vehicle. And if there's not an electric vehicle out there that'll meet your needs, or you're skeptical of the charging infrastructure for where you're driving, lease your gas or diesel vehicle, let somebody else have the stranded asset, and in 3 years, buy that electric vehicle. So I'm part of a network of electric vehicle associations and owner groups throughout British Columbia. I'm also part of a national body, and I'm also part of a global body. But our provincial body, because of the election coming up in October provincially, we've created a letter which has 10 proposals for the different political parties to consider. So I'll work with Anne to provide you a web link to this letter so you can read what the proposals are from this group. These are the different electric vehicle associations and owners groups that signed support the initial distribution of this letter. There is the Prince George Electric Vehicle Association that I founded, which this monthly meeting's part of, and has transitioned into the Energy Transition Group. I put out newsletters for the EV Association and the Energy Transition Group, so you can sign up for those for free. Mark Voda facilitates our Northern BC Canada electric vehicle Facebook group, so you can monitor what's going on there. I'm not on Facebook, but I'm still able to read the posts that are here, so it's got a lot of good information. Mark does a lot of recreational activities, hiking and stuff around Prince George, and does YouTube videos about that hiking experience. And he's also an electric vehicle driver that does amazing distance driving, and he documents his bigger trips. So if you want to find out about distance driving in Prince George and area, follow the Tesla Prince. And as I said, there's the Global EV Alliance. Every country seems to have their own national electric vehicle association. In Canada, it's the evsociety.ca. And then throughout British Columbia, there are many EV associations and groups. If you get access to the slide deck, most of those have web links here. You click on and you can get in contact with those if you want. Then there's the group that's happening tonight, the Energy Transition Group. We meet the second Tuesday of each month here at the university in Prince George. And the big thing that's happening is connected to that EV lobby letter. We've created through the UNBC sustainability team, the university's Energy Transition Group, and the Prince George Electric Vehicle Association. We've organized all candidates forums to occur October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, one for each of the 3 ridings that overlap Prince George. So that'll be in the Canfor Theatre. So feel free to subscribe to get those newsletters, or if you have questions or want to get connected to anybody with an electric vehicle, send me an email, and we're open to questions and discussion.
What vehicle is it you drive right now?
I have a 2016 Nissan Leaf, and somebody in our group here bought almost the identical car to mine about 4 months ago, and he bought it for $11,000. So if you're a 2-vehicle family or more vehicles, one can be a used, low range, low tech, slightly used, so degraded battery a little bit, electric vehicle, and the economics is just phenomenal.
Oh, right on.
Doug, how much pressure, political and otherwise, is there to go the hydrogen route?
There's a lot, and it goes back in time and for good reason. You might have heard of Ballard Power, that there's still around in different forms. Through the 90s, they did a lot of really good development work, and before we had the developments in batteries that were less cost and greater density, hydrogen did look like it was probably going to be the technology that would help us into the cleaner energy world. There's pressure to make Prince George the BC energy hub. Massive amounts of public dollars, your tax dollars, has been going to support research and development and pilots and infrastructure to support hydrogen. So that it's big. And then my personal observation, there's a lot of oil and gas connections to hydrogen. And there's a lot of legacy automobile manufacturing company connection to hydrogen. Hydrogen fuel is very expensive. It's more expensive than gas and diesel at subsidized rates today. And you've seen that the vehicles themselves are inefficient, but it supports selling fuel through private entities. It supports more regular maintenance and expensive maintenance. It keeps the gas and diesel vehicle infrastructure in place a lot better than battery electric vehicles, which is great for the oil and gas industry, great for the legacy automobile companies, not necessarily good for you and I, nor our pocketbook.
Agreed.
So I'm hoping we avoid hydrogen, but it will take a little bit of public awareness to start steering us away and realizing that the developments and advancements that have happened in electric technologies have directed electric and battery electric has been so significant that hydrogen is now in the dust and should be dropped, and the smart investment move is to drop it.
Thank you. I agree 100%.
What's
Yes.
maintenance of electric vehicles looking like in Prince George? Like, do we have a lot of shops for it? Is it something really expensive? And is that something you guys want to have Prince George promote more?
Okay, so I'll answer backwards there. There's, I think, 5 colleges in the province now have electric vehicle mechanics training programs. Most of them are just sort of basics. How do you diagnose a battery? How do you break down a battery to make it safe for the mechanic to work on? How do you identify cells that are weak, replace those cells, put it back together and operate it? But it's also how to do brake flushes and some other diagnostics and repairs. There is a more intensive program as well, that one of the facilities is doing, where mechanics are going once a month. And then in between time, they're doing online training and reading, very intensive. And this is for Red Seal mechanics, people who are already Red Seal mechanics, these training programs. So the ability to have that aftermarket service is there. Any of the companies the automobile companies that sell electric vehicles of their own makes and models, part of the requirement is that they also have a way of repairing those vehicles. Early adopters will find in Prince George, your electric vehicle might be trucked down to Kamloops or Kelowna and repaired there and then trucked back. It's under warranty, it's all looked after for you. And then we're getting the case where after warranty service won't be a problem, even locally. There's already mechanics who are trained up and training up. So that's the repair part. So the maintenance part, I strongly recommend you do an oil change at about 60,000 kilometers. You'll hear no oil changes. There is reducer fluid in my Leaf. It's 1 liter. It's not very expensive to do. And then you're looking at about every 100,000 kilometers after that. I've read 2 different types of coolants that you need to do at about 200,000 kilometers. Want to do your brake flushes about every 3 years. So for my Leaf, that's been about $160 to do the brake flush once every 3 years. You want to do, all the things you do on a gas car, maintain your wipers, rotate your tires. Your tire wear and tear might be a little greater than a gas vehicle. In part, electric vehicles are a little heavier, so they do a higher PSI. PSI is 36 PSI instead of 32 as you do for gas vehicles. They run harder and therefore they may wear more because of that extra PSI. The electric vehicles are so quiet that the rubber compound mix for electric vehicles is different than what you use in a gas vehicle. And that's so that they run quieter on the road. And my guess is that difference in rubber compound is probably softer to make it quieter, probably wears a little quicker. The big reason for tire maintenance, though, with electric vehicles is the instant torque. So because you have the ability to accelerate fast, doesn't mean you should. So I drive my vehicle in all eco modes on to back it off. So I now need to press 3-4 times further on the accelerator to get the same acceleration. If you accelerate hard, your rubber tires spin on the rims, and that's really hard on the tires. So you might end up replacing your tires fast. So as long as you're not going to be an aggressive driver, the tire issue probably isn't that much different than a gas vehicle. But you have no oil changes, no muffler, no catalytic converter. The list goes on and on. None of those costs.
Air filters,
You do have air filters.
okay.
Yeah, and so you do want to replace your air filter. But
That's
that
like a air cleaner for your,
yeah, the air flows through it to
Yeah.
clean the air that's in your compartment.
yeah.
But gas, diesel, and electric vehicles have those.
Mhm.
I get to it.
Yeah, and I had one more question, because I guess it's more of a rural thing, we're in PG. And accidents often happen to people driving in out of town in the winter. Have you seen anything about electric vehicles providing heat for X amount of time in the winter? Like if you get stranded in a snowstorm or something like that? Because I feel like that's a pretty big barrier that a lot of people have. They're like, is this going to be dependable if I'm stuck in a ditch for 4 hours? Because you can always throw a jerry can in the back, you stay warm. But how can we help or spread awareness about electric vehicles being safe even in those conditions? Because that's a pretty big concern. At least I've heard people talk about that with electric.
So your electrical use with the electric vehicle is mostly for making the wheels move. The percentage that goes towards air conditioning to heating is not that large. You can sit there parked and run your air conditioner heating and almost not see the range reduce. Like, it's not quick. If you're running your radio, it's nothing. You can run your cell phone. I've heard figures for multiple years. So in that sense, not an issue. Most people in Prince George with electric vehicles have thrown away their ice scrapers because they defrost so quickly. You have instant heat. So if it's -40, you still will get 30 degrees Celsius or 90 degrees Fahrenheit heat into the cab area within half a minute or a minute in an electric vehicle. You got, most of them have heated seats and a heated steering wheel. So which doesn't use a lot of electricity. So if you're in Los Angeles, stop and go traffic for 3 hours, your fuel gauge will hardly go down. Where your gas vehicle, as you're in that 3 hours, you're going to see your gas tank going down. So electric vehicles are preferable in those situations.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was just wondering if there was any like thing for people who have doubts about electric vehicles being safe in the winter. Like that sort of thing, because it makes sense. Heating is very energy efficient and you aren't driving, so it makes sense that it would be safe, but it's often, and people have difficulties rationalizing that.
Yeah.
Because you're burning gas and that should be warm. And they think that might be where the heat comes from. I'm not sure where the.
Well,
disconnect comes
with
from.
gas and diesel vehicles, you're always creating heat year round, and you then push the heat into the vehicle in the winter time. At -40, you might be looking at 20 minutes to defrost your windshield in a gas or diesel vehicle, because you don't have the same instant heat, the luxury of heat, as you do with a battery electric. But you do get a reduction in range because of the chemistry of the batteries in cold weather. The electric vehicle batteries, they like it when the outside temperature is 21 degrees Celsius. If it's warmer than that or colder than that, you're going to get reductions in range. And then with very cold batteries, they just don't hold the electricity quite the same way. So you might have a 40% or even 60% reduction in range in the really, really cold weather in Prince George. But if you have a 500-kilometer range battery and you're driving 30 kilometers, who cares?
Yeah.
Make sure you buy a battery that's big enough, knowing you do get this reduction in range. So I'm a commute driver, and I've been trying to get some of the distance drivers to prove this for me. But batteries warm when you drive, and they warm when you charge. So in a situation where commute driving, you might get a 40% reduction in range in cold weather. I'd like to see somebody drive to Edmonton. And my guess is that you might only see a 20% reduction in range that same day going to Edmonton, because your battery is warmer. Most electric vehicles, my current one doesn't have it, but my previous one did. They have battery management systems in them with a battery warmer. So my 2013 Leaf, if the battery itself got to -17, the battery warmer would kick in, warm the battery. Same idea as a block heater. And then when the battery is -10, it would kick off, stop warming the battery. So because of the battery warmer in those cold weathers, the conditions, your electric vehicle starts. And many people in Prince George during a really cold snaps the last 2 winters, their electric vehicles started, gave them instant heat, but their gas and diesel vehicles, they couldn't start.
I'm wondering, to follow up the gentleman's question, is there a link, Doug, to allay the fears of people who may be stuck in the ditch, and to sort of say how long a battery, an EV, a BEV, would keep you warm until you got safe or until you got rescued? Is there a link to some stats that might help
I don't know of any
Yeah.
offhand. I can look. If anybody does know of them, please share them with me and I'll put that out in a future newsletter.
Mhm.
It would be a good experiment or something.
Right. Ann.
What's that?
Yep.
It would be a good
Good
experiment.
experiment.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in the ditch.
It's but just somewhere off.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Like -40. It's
Yeah,
along
yeah.
the lines, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
You can play some video games.
That's right, exactly, yeah.
Maybe a question that could help Will answer is, do you have any facts on using battery vehicles as a load source for backup power supply for a house?
Facts, no. Examples, yes. So there's vehicle to X, which is using the power in vehicles to anything and everything. Vehicle to load, which is typically taking electricity from one electric vehicle and powering another electric vehicle, or running your coffee machine off of your battery. There's vehicle to home, so you can do an adapter to your house panel and buy an adapter for some of your large battery electric vehicles. You can power, so if there's a blackout, you can actually plug your house into your electric vehicle. And supposedly the Ford Lightning electric pickup truck can power a house for about 3 days. And I think the Silverado and the upcoming Sierra might be able to power a house for about 7 days on their batteries. And that's one of the reasons the Ford Lightning is sold so well in some areas in the US. People have actually bought them as being a backup power source for the houses because the electrical grid's not too strong. And there was an electric vehicle in Houston not long ago after, I think it was a hurricane, it was some disaster. The power was out. And so this electric vehicle drove up to a gas station and plugged into the gas station's power panel and ran the whole store. And all sorts of cars, gas and diesel vehicles, got gas because the electric pumps were working thanks to the electric vehicle. BC Hydro has a vehicle to load or vehicle to grid type of experiment in place right now. There's an electric school bus with a charging station that's set up. So I believe it's designed so that if there's a power outage, it can go to the hospital that's close by and power the hospital during a power outage. There are companies that are doing power to grid, vehicle to grid pilots right now with the intent of being able to do that in the future. And I've been pushing that all the utilities start talking about creating standards for vehicle to grid so that we have one type of port, one sort of, so all the electric vehicles can be to a standard that you can plug into the vehicle to grid ports, and all those ports will work so that we just have a consistency. So then with all the electric vehicle batteries, you don't need a battery for the grid and a battery for your vehicle. You can have one battery when it's not driving your vehicle, it's now working for the grid. And you can, Jeff Don recently did a presentation with the Electric Vehicle Society, and it'll be in my next newsletter, link to his presentation. And he's a strong proponent that we do this. And he says that if you make an agreement with the utility, never drop below 30% power level in my battery, and then you can always do what you need to do. You can get to another charging station and quick charge to do what you need. So you're never stranded, but have them stop charging at 60 or 63 or 70% and never overcharge beyond that. Then you'll have very little degradation to your battery. And the new batteries that are coming out today in vehicles as we speak are probably going to give you 1.5 million kilometers of driving to a 30% degradation. So 70% of new at 1.5 million kilometers. I don't know of any vehicle around the battery that's going to last that long. So you may as well degrade your battery and make money supporting the grid.
So to answer your question, if a vehicle can run a house for multiple days, run a heater and your CD player in the ditch for probably way longer than you could with a full tank of fuel. Not a combustion.
Yeah, yeah, it's just like when you have that back, people are like, oh yeah, I'm safe if I'm stuck in a snow.
Yeah.
Rather than it being like, well, it should, so you should be warm, right? Like, it's nice to have that,
Fact.
you're safe, it's
Yeah.
not a concern, that's the only reason I brought it up.
Yeah.
Your question, our discussion, and your nice clarification helps. So next time somebody asks, I'll be better at answering the question. Thank you.
It's funny, I said, last week, the guy that bought the Ford Lightning, like he just got it. He drove this Honda Civic to work, and I was making him like, wait, your new truck already break down? He said, oh no, power was out in College Heights, they're upgrading the system, so it's at home as a generator. Literally powering us, I was like, you're saying,
right, yeah.
literally
Yeah.
last week.
Yeah.
That was, Marlow, up in College Heights there. Yeah.
Ask if he wants to lend his truck. We even have some funds to compensate him for it. At the Labor Day, want to run the bouncy castle in the middle of the electric train circuit, so we don't have cables coming under the train tracks. So we'd love to park an electric vehicle and have the bouncy castle plugged into it.
Okay, no,
If he's
yeah,
willing,
I'll ask
pick
him.
up my card and get him to
Yeah,
email
yeah.
me.
Absolutely. Yeah, cool.
As well, stop the recording and. Yes, we do stop share even. And then we can get into informal discussion.
Informal's more fun.
Yeah.